everybody. This is Pat Windrow at the Cable Easel, again because it's Tuesday at 6 o'clock in the evening. And tonight I'm going to be doing something which is an answer to some requests that I have had in the past, namely painting reflections. Naturally, reflections immediately mean water of some kind. There are reflections on shiny tabletops and reflections on waxed wood and so forth, but for the most part reflections mean water. They also mean another thing. It means still water, or at least comparatively placid and calm water. So, what better place than an area where there is such a body of water? In Europe, they're all over the place, and so they are here in the United States. I have not been to the Orient yet, but I plan to go in October to paint and find my little places of still water over there. But what place which is the most famous for its water and its reflections but Venice? So I brought in a number of studies of Venice, finished ones, oil paintings, which I have one here on the easel. And I'm going to do one from a sketch that I did while I was there. I'll show you the sketch in a minute. Here is this is the oil study of the Grand Canal. You'll see that a little bit of a close-up would show you much better the fact that reflections do one important thing. They reflect the sky, and they also reflect the objects that are adjacent to the water. Naturally, in Venice, which is all streets of water, the reflections are everywhere. Here, however, on Long Island, such as this one, this is an area which is very familiar. It's West Meadow Creek. There are times when the surface of this creek is glass-like. It is just at ebb tide. As the out tide is stopping and the in tide is about to come in, this water becomes very still and it becomes almost a mirror. Of course, one has to choose the spot to find these wonderful mirror images. There is another one in our area called, upside down, Miss Windrow, here we are. There's another one called the Setauket Mill Pond. This one becomes very much mirror-like at different times of the year. It becomes quite agitated in the fall when the winds are up. This is north. Looking this way is north. You will find that this bridge, which was built by Ward Melville's father, Frank Melville, by Ward Melville in memory of his father, Frank Melville. This is the Melville Memorial Pond in Setauket. You can go and see it anytime you feel like driving along 25A and turning north on Main Street and coming along past the Caroline Church, and you will find this pond. If anybody is looking for places in which there are wonderful reflections to paint, I'm giving you that tip right now. Either West Meadow Beach Creek or the pond. Of course, if you're planning a vacation in Europe, you can always go to Venice. Now, the sketch that I have brought in was done with a magic marker, a very fine, I believe it's called a flare. I think a flare point, a fine flare point. And it's, I put it behind glass because I like to frame these things in case they, suffer in transportation. But here's a sketch of Venice. A little back canal that you find just about everywhere that you go to. You walk your feet off in Venice because there are no cars, almost no bicycles. What there is vaporetto, which are those motorboats that go scooting around like buses. Well, I'm going to be working from that. I brought in my oils again. I did oils last week and people seem to like that very much, so I brought the oils in again. I'm also in my kind of outside painting wear. When you go outside, you tend to be victim of the elements, namely sun and wind and so on. And so I always wear something to hold the hair in place because it's very distracting to paint with your hair flowing all over. Men probably don't have to worry about this, but us ladies, I find that I have to pin my hair back. So you might just as well think of finding me somewhere on some little canal in Venice, sketching and painting this particular scene. That's the best we can do. We have no way of getting over there with a little camera crew, much as they'd like to go, I'm sure. But we're going to have to settle for second best today and work from the sketch, and imagine that I am now sitting with my easel and my palette. I brought the palette in, just as I had last week, and I'm going to be sitting on a higher stool than I did last week. The light seems to be better this way. I'm using some new brushes. I want you also to look at these, and I'll tell you the price of them. This is a nylon brush, considerably less expensive than a sable one. It is nylon hairs. You can see how flexible they are. And at Pearl Paint in New York, reduced from $3.60 to $1.80, half price. It is good to know about these things. This one is a little bit smaller, it's $1.98. I have no idea why Pearl would do that. 2 cents less for one that's bigger, I don't know. But anyway, here is a sable one, which I use very often. Here is this one for the fine detail work. This is called a striping brush, and 2 sort of battered old ones for things like scrumbling around and making things that don't have to be particularly clean. I'm using some yellow chalk, and I'm going to sketch out from the sketch that you just saw on the screen. I'm going to lay it out just as I did last week, just laying out the shapes, because we can talk about that. The laying out of the shapes means that the complexity of drawing does not have to baffle people. You see that we are dealing in rectangles, a few triangles, but it is the transference of these to the second dimension, which is what we're doing, and which seems to be quite difficult for people to take. That's why they hesitate to take a subject or a form that is in the third dimension, which is what you see in life out there, to the second dimension, which is this flat area here. I don't know why I talk about these things. I think that they're important because a lot of times people say, I don't know what you mean by the second and the third dimension. So there it is, very simple. I'm not a physics student. I am not even particularly good at it, but I do know that you have to be aware of these things. Now the details, such as the gondola in the background, can come later. What we're dealing with here is merely these forms. So, if we can get closer, it would be helpful. I'm going to start by working a nice, well, I'll wait until this thing is in complete, so because it's we're losing part of the top. I'm going to start with the top, and I'm going to keep this a very limited palette. That means I'm going to keep the colors very muted, so that we can work, so that I can work more interestingly with the reflections. The reflections come from the clarity of the water. Water becomes clear when the sky is clear. We all know very well that sky is the thing that makes reflections in the water, and then whatever objects are near the water also become reflections. The reason that I have laid this out with so little sky is because the reflections are the things which are going to be interesting in this picture. So there's a great deal more space given over to the reflection part, to the water part, than to the sky. So we'll see if it works well. I have now graded the color of the sky, which is extremely sort of pale, non-bluish, ice blue sort of, down to a kind of a pale yellow ochre in which there's virtually no blue at all. I'm doing this because I remember what the color scheme is in Venice. It is of course on the Adriatic Sea. The atmosphere is important, and it's what colors the sky. And it may be helpful to know these things to explain why some of the Italian paintings that people are familiar with are what they are. Because the painters of the Renaissance, shall I lower this so that we can get it all in? There. The sky and whatever you see in Renaissance paintings are what they are because the realist painters of that period paid a great deal of attention to their environment and the paintings are not faded and they're not dirty. They are what they saw, which I think is really also something to know. The reason that my Long Island paintings look the way they look is because I live here and I'm a realist painter, and I pay a great deal of attention to the atmosphere that there is here. Now, to get back to the Venice thing, the buildings there are standing in water, probably anywhere between 30 and 40 feet of water, sometimes less. They also look as though they are falling apart because of the dampness, the incredible moisture that a city built on water must have, and the fact that it is near the ocean. So all of these buildings, with their stucco or brick facades and sidings, means that they are in fact really in sad shape, but it's what gives them the charm. So the pale and muted tones of these buildings give them the flavor, and they are what, of course, have sent painters to Venice for centuries now. The beauty of these wonderful pastel buildings that have faded. We seem to have a phone call. So, yes, good evening. May I help you? Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Maybe we can... we're waiting for the volume to come up so that I can hear the voice.
Hello?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. Mrs. Winder, I noticed you were working with oils. Would you say a word about slow drying and quick drying mediums? Have you ever used them? How do you use them? What are they good for?
Well, the quick drying mediums are very valuable because, especially for an itinerant painter such as me, because I need to be able to pack these things up at the end of a day and either go back the next day or take them home, and they have to travel. So I use a quick drying medium called the Maragé medium. It is this little blob of sort of tannish and yucky stuff here at the top of my canvas. I get it in Baltimore. It's very expensive, but it is invaluable to me. There are a few things on the market, a few products. One of them is called I think it's a Copal dryer. There's another one that is put out called Zec, which is in a tube. That's kind of a funny word for the French word dry. You can use that. I'm not sure that it won't crack, but there are a number of dryers. Japan varnish, I believe one can use a little bit. Why? Why do you ask?
I was just curious. I don't know anything about them.
Oh.
And I just wondered.
Oils normally take anywhere between 1 day and a week to dry if they are not mixed with something which is going to precipitate drying.
Oh.
If you paint very thick, it's going to take considerably more than a week. It's going to take 2 to 3, maybe even months.
I see.
I mean, if you lay it on with a palette knife and squeeze it on the way some people do, you know, all over the canvas, that's going to take months. I paint, I don't paint thin. I paint medium thick. But I must use my dryer because I am a traveling painter.
I see. Do you?
Yeah.
Do you varnish a painting ever after you're
only yes, 6 months after I finished painting it.
I see.
Yeah, you don't put varnish on immediately. You let the paint really sit and gel and mature.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Can I move my mic? Yes, of course. Excuse me a moment while I move my microphone up a little bit. It seems to be improperly placed tonight, and we want to be sure that everybody grabs these pearls of wisdom. Nevertheless, I hope that that's better, and if it isn't, we can readjust it again. It is of no importance to interrupt it for something like that. We have now the shady side of the building, which is, of course, the same color, but a few shades darker than the sunny side. If you make it too dark, that's going to give you a different time of day. It's going to give you a sort of an evening time. At noon or in the early afternoon, the sides, the shady side of a building is not quite as dark as it is as when the sun is really beginning to fade. These are things that I'm saying almost in generalities. It's very dangerous to do this kind of generalization because sometimes atmospheric conditions change that. However, for the most part, you will find that the shady side of the building is only a suggestion darker at high noon than it is on the sunny side. The rooftops in Venice, I'm going to wait for this to get the angle. Good. Okay. The rooftops in Venice are made of hand-made Italian roofing tiles. They vary in color and in shape and in size. Some are older than others because, of course, these roofs have been repaired since the time that Venice was built, way back maybe over... Well, I think that Venice dates back to the year, I don't know, 800 or 600. I really ought to come up with more information than that if I'm going to talk about it. But I do think that the replacing of these roofing tiles is being done all the time. Therefore, the rooftops are pretty much, they're not all absolutely uniform in color. They are basically the same brick color or tile color, which is a little bit sort of sienna and kind of rose and mauve and so on. Now, if there is any, the lady called, and I do believe it's because the number was put on the screen, but if you have any questions about what I'm doing, now's the time. Usually, if you call me a week later and ask me a question about what I did last week, it is less effective than if you call me right now as I'm doing it. As you can see, we are dealing with only planes of color. These colors are barely anything more than flat tones. This is a flat, and these are all flat tones, but you can see that with the choice of these darks and lights that you're getting a definite third-dimensional look about this. I think that because I want to make a point about the sun hitting a building that is behind another one can be made by making this building quite white. It will tell you that over here the sun is shining, and it happens to be able to catch the side of this building, just as it is going to be catching the side of this one. I'm working with pieces of information here which are trying to give you logical explanations for what a painting does. I think that the business of having a painting program on television should be truly a lesson, if possible, rather than a demonstration of somebody who knows what they're doing or who tries to do what you might call a show. What I'm trying to do is to instruct. I hope that that succeeds. I'm varying the color a little bit because it is to also show that interest can take place with a very subtle change in color. As you can see, I've put only a little tiny bit of, well, there's a little bit of vermilion in this with the white base, and a small amount of umber, which just tones down the rose. And the characteristic of Venice is, in fact, these absolutely stunning, beautifully painted pastel buildings. The disturbing thing that I found in Venice was, being a Long Island resident, I found that the lack of trees was very peculiar and a little disturbing. There are some green things growing in the various gardens along the canals. The Italians, of course, are great growers of things. We all know that from the grapes and the wines and so on, and the beautiful hanging gardens of Babylon, which are not in Italy, but it's all European, and the Italians are great growers of everything. So when you find a garden in Venice, you find that there's a tremendous amount of attention paid to the greens in the gardens, but there are no avenues with trees. What I'm doing here now is there is a building that is putting a shadow against this light building, and it has a peaked roof. It's not another building. It is the shadow of a building. These are things which I think will become evident the more we get into this painting. And you will see that the reflections See, it becomes quite dark down here because the little streets are very narrow and not much light gets down into the lower parts of these little canals, because this is a very narrow little canal going in here. This is an opening to a canal going in past this building. I'm thinking that maybe the Italian Tourist Board ought to be eternally grateful to me for talking about this. I'll bet you that people are going to get all lit up about going down and going to Venice and trying to spend some time in this absolutely enchanting city. I'm sure that everybody knows it's enchanting, but I'm going to help to push that along. You have a whole new, this pink tone that I'm putting in here is to illustrate, I have it on my sketch, is to illustrate how the bricks in the lower part of this building have been exposed because the stucco, or the covering of the bricks. There was a time where bricks were not considered as good looking as they are now. Now everybody wants the brick fireplace and everybody wants a tremendous amount of brick on the front. There was a time when bricks were covered up to hide the fact that there were bricks. Very odd, but nevertheless so. And so when you see bricks exposed, it's usually down by the water where the covering of the building has deteriorated from the moisture and the wetness and so on, and has fallen into the water, and what is left are the bricks. So the ancient look of the city is due to the fact that things are deteriorating. They are trying to save them, and I do believe there is a tremendous amount of restoration. I know that when I was there was a lot of restoration taking place in the palazzos, or palazzi, or whatever my son will tell me which is right, palazzo, palazzi. But the palaces are in sad shape in many instances, and it's much too expensive for the average Venetian to restore, and so he or she or they must use these buildings for companies. The radio television station RAI, which stands for Radio something or other Italiano Television, occupies one of the palazzos, and it's to have offices in one of these palaces is really sort of extraordinary. It's quite a thing to see. Something as modern as a television station, such as we have up here, housed in a building in which there are murals by Tintoretto and Guardi and the great Italian classic painters. There are things that Leonardo painted. There are murals by, who are some of the, they'll come to me as the show progresses. So the interest in saving these things is definitely in great activity over there, because they know what they have. They know that these buildings are irreplaceable and the artworks are irreplaceable. The marble floors of maybe 8 or 10 different colors and designs in the floors of ordinary homes are absolutely stunning. Now let's do a little bit of work on here with just a suggestion of how one would do these windows. You would not get in there with what you would call a real pencil or an attempt to make a rectangle. You would merely suggest these. They are also going to be reflected in the water later. There are lovely balcony arrangements, so we would try to suggest some of that. Perspective comes in here. You have to have some understanding of the perspective involved. And this is all done by practice and a sketch that you bring back. It is not possible to remember these things without any help from a sketch. So one must, if you do go traveling this summer and you think that you might want to attempt something, don't take paints. That's complicated. I can attest to that it is really an awful schlep, as they say, to take paints. But take a sketchbook and work. Now we're going to start working on some water. I'm going to start working on this. The water the color that I'm using here is the same color as that I have in the sky. And I'm going to keep it pretty much that way. I'm also going to keep some logic going. Naturally, this building is going to reflect directly below it. This building is going to reflect directly below that one. Somewhere along the line, the whole reflection is going to end in just a wind-swept surface. So we have this break in the, and here where this building comes, let's say we're going to be able to find the sky there, and then the other one will continue. I'm sure that this should be fairly obvious that this building is going to continue here. Now you can use your little guidelines if you want to. As you can see, I'm using some guidelines here. The side of this building is where this reflection is going to become darker. And this is for people who have asked me to demonstrate how to paint reflections. I sure hope they're watching. If they're not, they can see this on Saturday at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, rebroadcast from this very tape. Naturally, at that time, you cannot make phone calls and ask me anything because I'm not here. It is an electronic device that is showing you the program then. All right, we now have logic at work. We have this white building. This white building is reflected in a sort of a mirror image, but of course the water surface is a little bit disturbed. So it's going to be less than a straight line. It's going to have its wiggles, depending upon whether a gondola has just gone by or whether a motorboat has just gone by. If a gondola has gone by, there are barely any wiggles. If a motorboat has, the water is very agitated and the wiggles become more wiggly. These are things which are evident to me because I'm a painter of the outside. I'm trying to, sometimes the reflections are a trifle darker. White is rarely darker. Sometimes the reflections are a trifle darker than above. So with the understanding that possibly only a gondola has gone by, the reflections here are only slight. They are just, well, just wiggles. You can pull a streak across, which gives you the illusion of a ripple in the water. It's effective. It is not what William Alexander does. You do not take a brush and pull it down like this. This is for people who have tried that and who have found that it simply doesn't work. That is not the way to do it. One does it with a painting technique, not with a trick of pulling a brush down. All right, now, somewhere along the line, this is, oops, too much blue, sorry, it got popped into the blue pile, much too much. So we'll dilute all that with some white and a touch of the ochre, because I've got a little bit of ochre in the sky above. And somewhere along the line, this is meeting the reflections of the buildings. Because reflections do not have an endless life, they stop. They just become lost in the foreground of the water. Now, we've got the reflections of this building and this path of light here from this canal. We probably must give you the reflections of this little building in the distance here, which is not going to last very long, but it should certainly be indicated a little bit back there. It's very far away, so it would be difficult to see. There is also something of a rooftop, which I must put in there. All right, now let's get to this. One should try, as best you can, to remember the colors which you used in the original building, and if you can't remember, you better continue to mix and match until you find it. And then mute it a little bit with some blue. Give it a little bit of blue, even if it's a purplish tone. Give it a little bit of blue to give it a muted quality. The water is not a mirror. It is mirror-like. A mirror is a mirror, and and it behaves. beautiful and wonderful European kind of looking places are there. Now, because there's an exposed brick, my sketch tells me that the stucco has worn away and is casting a shadow on the brick part. So I'm going to remove these bricks and maybe give a few, maybe I'll give a few nice cracks in the building a little bit later. But I will certainly explain everything that I'm doing. Now here, these bricks here in the shadow part would be darker than the ones up above. And the look, the old look is, now you see the crack between this building, the division of the building has got to be designated so that you know that that's not a building but a shadow. Well, let me see. Oh my, we are moving along. Now I'm going to have to work with the part of the building that is brilliant up there, and it was sort of yellow ochre and quite bright. And here come the indistinct but painted reflections in the lower part of this picture. I'm picking up as much of that brilliance as I can, because that building is tall, taller than the rest, and the reflection continues down to the bottom of the canvas, I beg your pardon. And the rest of this whole lower area here is pale because of the paleness of these buildings. Now I'm going to go over here and I'm going to make that one, obviously. As you can see, this is paler than this, so I'm going to make the reflection slightly paler also. Now, the sketching that I did of these pilings in the water, I will deal with subsequently. And you can see that here is the shadow on the building, and here is the reflected shadow in the water. It is a detail which is important in fine arts landscaping. It is also something to be looked for when you're looking at paintings by the masters, or the less than masters, or the people who are not a household word. And it's interesting to me to go to museums and to see pieces, works, of people whose names are not too well known, and to realize, yes, it's no accident that these people are not that well known, because they're not that good. They're not as good as the masters. It's all deserved. All of the beautiful paintings and the well-known names are deserved. I guess a lot of people maybe also will say, well, I don't like Picasso. I think that's junk. However, try to do it sometime and you'll see that it is far from easy and many times extremely frustrating and difficult to do. So you see, I'm a realist painter that can recognize the value and the complexity of even the most contemporary kind of approach to painting. That's maybe why I write art criticism now quite often for the Three Village Herald, because I find that I have now, after all these years, been able to open my mind a little bit, something not so easy to do, to other styles. It takes some time. Now I'm putting in the reflection of this big corner building here. The foreground of these reflections are going to be more visible and a great deal more agitated. According to my sketch, there must have been something going on in the water here, down here, that wasn't going on up there, because this water is very placid and this water is very active. Well, windows get reflected as well. Windows, let us place one right here. And before we go any further, let's give that window its proper reflection. The window, the distance between the window and this shadow, one should consider in the reflection. So if it's approximately this is logic at work again, nothing accidental, all very logical. That window must be placed in such a way that it makes sense. It can't be stuck over here someplace. It is directly below the other one. I hope that looks directly below. It is below to me, but this is being shot at an angle, because you see the side of my canvas, so there is an angle. It may be a little distorted, but I doubt it. And here's the other window. We're going to do with the same the same logic. If this window is this distance from this line, let's put that funny line in. Let me see if I can pull that off. Let me see, it goes approximately like so. Because that line is definitely going to be reflected as well. And so this window is a little bit farther, a little bit up from that line. This is called points of reference. I hope that young Chris is watching. He said to me, nobody ever talked to me about points of reference before. Well, now he's got it. Okay, we have another window way at the top of this building, in the same position. Let's get that top of that building in. Same position as the other one, because windows tend to be on top of one another for the construction of the building. And then there is a rather delicious shadow being cast by this building up here. It is not very deep because these rooftops don't go over very far. This window cannot be reflected in here. There isn't enough space on the canvas. The reflection does not go down that far. So they're in there, but they are not reflected in the water. Let's see if we can do that once more, and let's put a nice window in this shadow part to tell you that this is part of this building. Let's give it some darkness, a little bit darker, and let's give it my sketch tells me that there was a frame around it, as opposed to just a hole in the wall. Now, we have this window being reflected just about here. And you can make it trifle longer, because reflections do that. They seem to go on a little bit, especially at night. It's fascinating how reflections work at night. And you'll see that I hope that's directly below it. It doesn't look it on my monitor, but then again, I may be looking at it at a funny angle. And there is a pipe here. Apparently, I sketched a pipe, maybe some kind of a drain pipe of some sort. It is in shadow, therefore it's not going to be as brilliant as the other one, and it has a reflection. Isn't that convenient? The reflection of this pipe runs down, and it has a shadow side. The pipe has a shadow side. So that shadow side also gets a reflection. Gets a reflection. I've interrupted my puddle lines. Now, so we have a very simplified study of reflections. Now, these windows on the side here are going to be seen in great profile, and therefore they're just long lines. They are in perspective, and they don't have to be dealt with in a complex and architectural manner. They can be merely suggested. This is called painterly painting, whereby the little one masterful stroke, if you can make one, to give you the illusion that, there is a window. So this window, of course, will be reflected here. Study and reflections. This is what this program is about today. And it's fascinating to study these things, because so much misinformation is being given out about reflections. They are not accidental. They are painted. The reflections become a part of the painting, and if they don't, it's not true painting. That's just that simple. Now, the top of this building, which we may have forgotten, has got a dark shadow underneath it, and that shadow is being reflected also. Interpretive. We can be interpretive about this kind of painting of the reflections, and we can now also jump up here to the roof of this building. I will probably see this building reflected down here, so let's put that in before we go any further. I do not want to forget that white building right here, and it's going to be probably right here. No question about the fact that this this subject matter shows very eloquently the problems, but also the wonderful thing that reflections do. I don't like what I've done down here. I'm going to pull this building even further up and just let that roof line disappear at the bottom. The questions that I've had about reflections should be sort of fairly answered by the application of this lesson. Now, up here, underneath this roof, in a subtle manner, because after all this building is pale, there are decorations that I'm not going to make a big deal about. There were decorations here, and there were also windows with frames around them. These can be indicated only in a very interpretive manner at the bottom. Okay. The freedom with which you work on these reflections, it may look freer than it is. It actually is rather controlled, and that's why experience with drawing is important. And if you sketch before you paint, you will find tremendous amounts of information coming to you merely by sketching. I'm going to give this a little blob of disturbed paint and stucco stuff here because my sketch tells it to me, but that's too dark, so I'm going to lighten it. None of this is should be anything but very subtle. Of course, there are going to be windows all up and down. Oh, let me see, there's a lovely little roof coming out from here, which I hadn't noticed before, and it's kind of pale. And it will, of course, be reflected here. Somewhere along the line, we will see a reflection here, because it's a mirror. Well, we have a few moments left. There is, of course, the business of chimneys. And chimneys are details which have to be dealt with. The chimneys in Venice are so beautiful. They are, some of them are sculptures. They have pots on top, and they have funny little, sort of, it looks like little towers of things, and many wonderful shapes, and they are so fanciful. The tops of these chimneys are a trademark of Venice. I suppose it's because the Venetians just can't help but be designers, even if it comes to doing chimney tops. Now, this building here is in tremendous shadow because it's obviously not being hit by any sunshine, and I'm going to put a very subdued shadowy color that I'm mixing with some mauve, some yellow ochre. And I'm going to put it on, that's a little too dark, I'm going to put it on very freely and show you how you can give some interest to this otherwise closing in of this picture with this dark building that is casting such a dark reflection. Phone call. Okay. Well, you got to me just in time. Yes, good evening.
Yeah. I wonder how you get started in painting.
You get a pad and a pencil and you start to draw.
Like what kind of things?
Well, if you're going to go and buy, how old are you?
12.
Well, if you're 12, I think you probably would be old enough to be able to work in oils if you're very careful, and if you're a very careful and organized young person, and not get oil paints all over your hands and face and clothes and furniture, then you can certainly start painting in oils.
Does it cost a lot?
Well, there are different grades of oil paints. Some of them are more expensive than others. The Winsor Newton paints are very expensive. There is the American paints that are less expensive.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye. I have been asked a couple of times if I wouldn't please put out some kind of a book that is going to give this information. Well, I can't do that. Putting out a book is an enormous project, which I find that I would find in a great deal of trouble. First of all, financing, and secondly, there are many books on the market which would be serve the purpose of this kind of need. So the art stores have got them. Let's get back to this business of making this a little bit more interesting than what you see here. My sketch tells me that something is sticking out from the side of this building. It's probably something made of iron, and it protrudes outside of the building, and it looks like it might be some kind of a gate for an arrangement here on the building. It kind of gets lost in the shadows, but it gives us some interest about, it's probably the part of a balcony, because balconies are just everywhere there. And then we have also, well, time is running out, so I must get these lovely pilings in. They are gray, usually gray, maybe even black, maybe sort of really weather-beaten. But the pilings in Venice are very important because that's where you tie up your gondola and your boat. You don't own a gondola if you're a Venetian, you own a motorboat. The only gondolas are the tourist trap things that you ride in when you're a tourist. There isn't a Venetian left in the 20th century that owns a gondola. He will own a yacht or a motorboat, but he certainly isn't going to own a gondola. But they are still there, these pilings. Some of them are very elaborate, beautifully decorated with great swirling things and great little caps on the top. But for the most part, they are just old, rotten, gray pilings that we are familiar with in any watery place. And they have their reflections beautifully playing about in the water. Now, we have a short time left. Let me just, we have 2 minutes left. We can put a couple of more pilings in, and the gondola. We certainly can't leave Venice without putting the gondola in. And we'll just suggest it way off here next to this building in a little, they are, as I say, they're tourist attractions. They don't have anything to do with life in Venice, except to entertain and romanticize the city. It costs about $15, the same as a ride in Central Park, with the horse and carriage, which nobody owns anymore. You don't own a horse and carriage anymore. You take a ride in the park with it. And these gondolas provide the same purpose. They are, of course, very picturesque, and there's always a little man in them somewhere, and that little man can just be given, some sort of feeling about him. He would have his own reflection as well. Well, and of course, let's put another little gondola coming out from behind the other building to show you that that is a canal. 1 minute left. This is a canal going off into that distance. So we've gotten a huge amount. The other thing about Venice, which I can close with in the last few moments, is that there is now, of course, the advent of the electric line. The electric line comes into the buildings, and guess who sits on the electric lines? The pigeons. Pigeons are everywhere in Venice. They're on the Piazza San Marco, and they're on the buildings, and they're on the telephone lines. And so, the pigeons are as much a part of Venice as the canals and the gondolas and the painters. Well, I believe that, have we got just a few more seconds left? Yeah, 30 seconds. Well, we can close in 30 seconds. I'll sign this in a moment. Thanks for watching. I hope that this has been informative, entertaining with some luck. I hope that we've produced a picture which you find is worthy of an hour spent, and also the fact that we have talked about something which a lot of people love to think about painting but don't really get down to it. Find a spot that has still water. Make a sandwich and go and sit by it with a sketch pad and see if you can't draw what you see. This is Pat Windrow at the Cable Easel, wishing you good night and thanks for watching. I'm going to sign this picture and see you next Tuesday at 6 o'clock. Bye-bye.